Hi, welcome everybody. We're just going to give participants a few minutes to get on. We welcome you back to the second day of the home visiting conference for 2022. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes while everybody gets connected. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the 2022 Kansas Home Visiting Conference. I can see that people are still getting connected to the platform, so we're just going to give it a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to say welcome back on behalf of the committee, and stay tuned for a couple more minutes. Welcome. If you're just joining, on behalf of the Planning Committee, I want to welcome you back to the second day of the Kansas Home Visiting Conference. We're just giving everybody a chance to get connected to the audio. So we'll maybe stand by for another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Welcome to the room, everyone. We're just waiting to get connected to the audio. You can still see our participants coming on, so I'm just going to give it maybe another half a minute or a minute, and we'll get started. But welcome. Okay. Hi, everyone. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started with introductions. We're a couple minutes after time, and I want to be aware of everybody's time commitments. So thank you for joining the second day of the 2022 Kansas Home Visiting Conference. Welcome back on behalf of the Planning Committee. We're really glad you're here, and we think you're in for a treat today. So once again, I hope you can kick back and relax, enjoy your colleagues, enjoy the learning, and enjoy the conversation that we're going to have through the next 4 hours. So just a couple of housekeeping reminders. The first is that we will be recording this session, and so you may see a message that tells you that recording is in progress. The second thing that I want to remind you about is that if you are wishing to receive continuing education credits for the conference today, you can use your dashboard, and in the right-hand corner of your dashboard, you'll find the section regarding your continuing education credits. So I'm Lisa Williams, and I'm with the Kansas State Department of Education. And again, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all back, and I'm ready for another exciting afternoon and an exciting uh, time of learning. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Giovanna Ross. Uh, and I got to talk with Dr. Ross a little bit before the meeting. And so I do just want to tell you a little bit about her before she begins, and then Dr. Ross will tell you a little more in depth. But over the past 25 years, Dr. Ross has served as in a variety of roles within the field of early childhood education. She's been a classroom teacher, an early interventionist, a home visitor, teacher educator, researcher, and advocate. In her current role, Dr. Ross is the Director of Early Learning for the Mid-America Regional Council, and she works with her team to provide leadership and coordination to build a robust early learning system with strong families, skilled teachers, quality programs, supportive communities, sustained and sufficient funding, and multi-sector collaboration. So what a great honor it is to welcome you, Dr. Ross, to our platform to talk to our parent educators and participants. And we really look forward to your conversation on rediscovering why we knock on that door. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. And thank you so much, Lisa. I so appreciate that the planning committee reached out to me to be able to speak to this wonderful audience around topics that are near and dear to my heart. As Lisa said, while I started in the classroom, while I was in graduate school, I was an early interventionist for the Missouri First Steps program. And so worked closely with families in their home in a variety of ways, mostly through that interdisciplinary component. And I stay engaged with home visitation now. I had the opportunity to work with the Kansas McVie program as an evaluator for an emerging partner within Children's Mercy Hospital, the TIES program, and was able to work with the Kansas department around that piece and to look at what is happening during visits and why do visits go well, and what are some things that happen that maybe take the visits off track, and then how do you stay true and have efficacy to the model that you're delivering as well. And so I am honored to be here and to bring together my work as a classroom teacher, a home visitor, an evaluator, and now within systems building to talk to you all about rediscovering why you knock on that door. I think that right now is a time where we've been really thinking about, why do I do what I do? What is driving me to do the work that I do? And I can say, even personally, I have started to have those thoughts with myself, like, what is driving me? What am I here for? How am I making an impact? What is fulfilling me? And so today, our plan during our time together is to really start to look at that, renewing our sense of purpose. So what is it that has brought us to this place of having to do some rediscovery? Then we're going to talk a little bit about replenishing and rebuilding our collaborative relationships and perspective taking. What I know in my work, not only as a classroom teacher in an interdisciplinary classroom, as a home visitor with a multidisciplinary team, and in my work now, is that I can't do my work unless I have other people with me, whether they're a member of my immediate team that I'm supervising, or they're partners in the community, or they're the families that we are working to provide services and supports. We need to have those collaborative relationships. And so we'll look at that through this lens of perspective taking. And then we're going to finally move into rediscovering why you knock on that door. What is your why? Why do you do the work? What makes you get up out of bed in the morning? What makes you feel fulfilled when you get home in the evening? And then we'll move into just some of my observations of helping to do that renewing, rebuilding, and rediscovering as well. So I want to start by being really open and honest and saying that I have inspirations that I pulled in from the information that I'm going to share today. Some of you may be really familiar with the work of these two individuals. Some of you may know one of them. Some of you may know none of them. I want to put them up front though, because they are really what helps me to think through some of the questions around renewing, rebuilding, replenishing, and rediscovering. The first is Brene Brown, which you may know either through her books that she's done. She has an amazing podcast that she has done. And really, if you were an Oprah fan like I was, that's how I first got to know Brene. She is really helpful of helping us to reframe and to think about things such as vulnerability and daring to lead. And what does it mean to be a leader? The second person that really is an inspiration for what I'm bringing forward to you today is Simon Sinek. And Simon Sinek is most known for his TED Talk around what is your why, finding your why. And so I think he really helps to frame in what I feel is a more simplistic and manageable way of really stating why it is that you do what you do. And so while there, you will see, if you know the two of them, some flavors of them within my talk today around why do I keep knocking on that door as well. So let's just jump right in. And I just want to acknowledge why we are probably in this place of needing to think about our why, being able to renew and rediscover what we're doing. And I will say, even myself in my work, really trying to think about what is driving me to do the work and to really think about families and children. And I always like to just start, and I know it feels like that may be over discussed, and so I'm not, just know that I'm not going to focus on it too much. But I think one of the things that is really driving these conversations of being reinvigorated is the pandemic. And, just the change and what it did to the work that we do, whether you are in a classroom supporting individuals, or most of you in homes supporting those families, or supporting in different ways, and trying to figure out how do you pivot and change the work that you do to meet the needs of families when you can't do it in the way that you've always done it before. And so that's hard work. And that creates then what Brene Brown talks about as vulnerability. This idea of uncertainty, how does this look? How do I frame what it is that I'm doing? Some risk. Some of you may have never really thought about how to do visits virtually. Right now, for example, me giving a keynote address without seeing faces, you're like, are people hearing the message? Are they able to see and they get that reaction? It feels different. And so the question I'm asking myself in my vulnerable times is, what is that best way? Am I delivering information that is going to resonate with others? And maybe there's a nugget that people are able to pull out. And so you have to take risk and you have to do things differently. And then also vulnerability brings emotional exposure. And so that's some of those pieces that maybe that we've been working through. And so when you're new at something, that is the epitome of vulnerability. So when you're new at learning how to work in a different way, there's that uncertainty, there's that risk, and there's that emotional exposure. And what Brene Brown likes to say is the more willing we are to embrace those difficulties, those uncertainties, and try new things, the more successful we're going to be. And she calls it embracing the difficulty and trying just those new things. And so she has a podcast, as I mentioned earlier. And this podcast resonated so profoundly with me. I wanted to be sure to share this with you as we're setting the stage for our why and rediscovering why we do what we do, because sometimes we have to unpack sort of the difficult piece. She has something that she calls terrible first times. If you've ever listened to Brene Brown, she is not always as clean in her language. She calls hers something different, but I'm going to name it the terrible first time. And really it's because you're experiencing something for the first time, something that you've never had to do before. So while the pandemic is one, we can take it back to just your own your own work and say, I have to manage people virtually. I have to interact with families virtually. I have to connect resources virtually, all things that are different. And so some of the things that we can do to take control of this feeling of this terrible first time is to name it. Why do I feel like this? Why am I confused and out of control and like I don't know what I'm doing? And so when we're able to name that terrible first time, we identify it, we name it, we start to take back the power of those feelings of not having that control. We start to really think about how we can provide meaning and language to what it is that we are experiencing. Martin Luther King Jr. defined power as the ability to affect change and achieve purpose. So when you start to name things, it gives us the power so that we can start to affect change and start to achieve purpose. And she goes on to say that when we name and own hard things, it doesn't give the hard things power. It gives us the power to affect and change and achieve purpose. And so sometimes just taking a moment to name the fact that what you're doing is hard, that interacting with families in a different way is hard, that it is not as smooth as I would have hoped on certain pieces, but naming it, putting it out there so that you're not holding that in. And maybe you'll get some feedback from others that will give you some insight as to what it is that maybe you're seeing that is different from what they're seeing. So when we start to name things, it starts to normalize what's happening. That's what it's supposed to feel like when it's a terrible first time. So I don't know if any of you during the pandemic got into the Instapot craze. I did some Instapot cooking. I have to tell you though, that Instapot is sitting in my garage on a shelf because of this one thing. It's the steam valve. The steam valve is very intimidating. And so when Brene Brown talks about normalization, it's sort of like releasing that valve on the Instapot and all the steam just comes pouring out. So it helps to normalize it. You're naming it because someone else may say, I've experienced that too. You've never done something before, so you can't draw from experience. And so sometimes that makes it more difficult. The other piece is that naming what's going on provides perspective. The feeling's not forever, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be successful at everything. It's just that function of experience. So the less experience I have with something, the less perspective. So you can talk about the pandemic in this way, but you can also talk about being asked to do a new curriculum or maybe a new module that comes with your curriculum, or the interactions that you're going to have. Maybe you're going to try something new with those that you supervise. You're going to do some strengths-based coaching. So sometimes when it's new, you feel like, oh, I'm not going to be any good at this, but it's just that you have to remember that perspective is a function of experience. So the less experience you have with something, the less perspective you're going to have about it. And then the last thing that naming leads to is the reality and expectation check. This may not be great for a while, but I'm not going to crush it right away, but I'm going to get there. It's going to take me a minute to learn how to share different pieces on my Zoom screen, or how to launch a poll, or how to toggle between a PowerPoint and a video. But I'm going to get there. And so when you name something, it helps with that reality and expectation check. And so the reason that I wanted to start with just framing and thinking about our perspective and renewing through the pandemic is that the pandemic is a collective terrible first time that's actually lasting a really long time. It's different. Today is different than it was a year ago and 2 years ago, but it's still impacting the way that we've done things before. And the thing that is hard about it is that it's a collective terrible first time for everyone. We don't have someone that has gone through it before us. Maybe if I had a peer, if I was a parent educator and I was going through the new training for the curriculum I'll be implementing, I would have had someone that's done it before me and I can draw from them. But because the pandemic is collective, it's really difficult to draw from others' experiences. And we may have those feelings of, I don't know what we're doing, or trying to be normal when nothing is normal. That word is really difficult, I think, always to think about being normal. What does that really mean? We are trying to reassure others when we don't feel sure about anything. Think about those that you work with in homes that are maybe lamenting the fact that they can't leave. They have a young infant at home. It's difficult. And you're trying to reassure them that, this isn't going to be forever, but yet you're still trying to also reassure yourself. So that can be really difficult and draining as well. And the other piece that has been happening is disappointment. So you've had maybe trips planned that have fallen through, or you were planning to see a family because you were hitting a big milestone and then someone became sick and you weren't able to do that. Or maybe you were planning on getting together with old friends and then that didn't work out either. And so these are all pieces we have to think about, but I want to hone on in a little bit on disappointment and perspective. It's okay that you're safe, that you're healthy, that you have a job, that you have food, you have housing, you have a car, you have a way to get your groceries, and still be disappointed. Denying your disappointment doesn't make you more empathetic towards people that have it worse than you. And Brene Brown will point out, in some ways, it makes you less empathetic. And so just know that it's okay for you to be disappointed, even if it is something that you have more than someone else as well. And so just wanted to frame sort of this idea of renewing and replenishing in the fact that we are still in the midst of our lives being impacted by a pandemic. And so if you don't name what you're feeling, if you don't own the feelings and feel them, Brene Brown says they'll eat you alive. They'll just kind of keep eating at you as well. So, okay, Giovanna, you told us all these pieces around terrible first times and things are happening. So now what do I do? And so some of the things that you can do when you're thinking about renewing and replenishing is to build in that rest and recovery time. Some of you will say, oh, that is easier said than done. It doesn't have to be like an hour of your day, because the next one is to find something good, even if it's not enough. 5 minutes of something that is just for you to rest and recover is better than 0 minutes. 1 minute of deep breathing is better than trying to move right into the next thing before you're ready to do. It's something that I have to remind myself just around finding some time, even if it's not enough. And then take advantage of small moments. Think about how you are if you're interacting with your own families. I don't know about you all, but sometimes in my work, because it never really stops, I can get certain things done in a day, but it doesn't mean that everything is done. I can sometimes have a hard time being present with my family. And so just that, taking advantage of those small moments. So when I'm riding in a car full of 5th, 6th graders who are singing at the top of their lungs, just reveling in that and smiling about how I'm so fortunate to be able to take them from their scout meeting to go roller skating and back. And then the last one is to really that engagement, engage in play. So think about engaging in an activity that is for enjoyment and recreation rather than for a serious or practical purpose. What is something that you enjoy? Play for adults looks different. For me, playing could be a crossword or Sudoku, or doing a word search. And in some cases, I hate to admit it, but I will, Candy Crush for a little while I'm watching a show in the background. And so you want to be sure that you're engaging in play. The other thing that you want to do is engage with others. And that's going to move us into this next sense of replenishing and rebuilding your collaborative relationships, making sure that you are engaging with others. And I'm going to talk about this more specifically from your work side and the work that you're doing. But I want to start by saying collaboration is all about perspective. Can the person with whom you're collaborating understand your perspective? Can you understand the perspective with whom you are collaborating. And I think when we look at the world of home visitation, that is so important to think about perspective, because we typically are all coming from different disciplines. When I was working both in a classroom and doing early intervention, I was the special instructor, so the child development side around cognition, social emotional skills, etc. Well, I then also had to, I shouldn't say had, I was able to collaborate with my speech pathologist, my physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and really to think about how are we sharing perspective. And so I want you to be thinking about collaboration as perspective as we move through this next portion of our time together. So here we go. We're going to zoom really far in. And I'm just going to let you look, see if, what do you see? You can be thinking to yourself, what is it that I see? And then if I then take this, I'm really zoomed in, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Oh, look, the picture is a little bit different. Now, instead of just the comb on their head, I'm seeing the whole rooster. But if I continue to zoom back a little bit, oh, look at that. Not only do I see the rooster that's there, but I also see children looking out a window at the rooster. So I'm going to then also take another step back. And now what do I see? Well, look, it looks like we are on a farm and the children are in an old barn looking out the window at the rooster. And if I continue to step back again, I see then, oh, it's actually not a real farm at all. It's a child that's on the cover of what looks like, I believe, is a magazine. And we can see that that's where they were illustrated. And then if I take a step back again, well, gosh, not only is it there, but the picture actually is zooming all the way in. For someone I would like to say is on a cruise, enjoying their time together. So when you start to think about collaboration, sometimes we are really honed in to what it is that we are focused on and not always thinking about the greater picture of what's happening around us. So if I stay focused on that rooster's comb, I may miss out on other aspects that need to be also worked towards or supported. And so the key around collaboration is not only focusing on your area. So if I'm special instruction, focusing on their cognitive development, but also thinking about how are they with identifying textures, or how are they with their mobilization from point A to point B? How are the families and the caregivers doing within their role? And so if you only focus on your expertise, you could start to miss the whole picture that then could really enhance what you're able to do to support children and family. So collaboration is not just working together, it's also understanding the perspective that you bring, as well as this perspective that others are bringing to the table as well. So when we look at collaboration, I think it's helpful to think about that distinction between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary collaboration. And so we're going to talk about that as we get into relationships, but one of the key things to collaboration is to actually plan for it. Unless you are all in the same space together, which does not necessarily happen nearly as much as it used to, it's really difficult for collaboration to take place organically. And so you have to plan for it. And when you're starting out, you may need to be thinking about, how do I build an agenda that is not only going to feed the need of what I have to accomplish, but also the needs of my collaborators as well. So be thinking about, what are some pieces that we want to look at? What are the goals of our time together so that it feels meaningful and not just something else that we need to have on our list? The other key to interdisciplinary collaboration is to be fully present. It's so easy, particularly on Zoom, to be there, but be doing something else. And so turn your cameras on if you are in a meeting where you are collaborating together. Put things aside just as if you were in a face-to-face meeting. If you're in a face-to-face meeting, I always challenge my team to not bring their phones with them. It's so distracting when your phone is beeping, then your watch beeps, etc. So it makes it more difficult to be fully present in what's happening as well. And so when we think about being fully present, it also is with those communication skills that you have. We're all busy, but we want to make sure that we are listening, we're making eye contact, we're asking clarifying questions, and then repeating back just to make sure that we are understanding what others are saying to us as well. So the other component, the next one, is building relationship and understanding of roles. So I like to then, when we're talking about roles, is just to talk a little bit about the difference between a multidisciplinary team and an interdisciplinary team. So multidisciplinary teams, they draw on the knowledge from different disciplines, but you kind of stay in your own lane. So the PT is going to do the PT things, the OT is going to do the OT things, the special instructor will do the special instruction things, speech will do their things, etc. When we get into interdisciplinary collaboration, we start to look at how do you have some harmony between what's happening. So while my focus may be the cognitive and social emotional growth of children, I really can't do that absent of speech and language, or some of the fine motor skills or the gross motor skills that our OTs and PTs are addressing. So when you start to get into that interdisciplinary collaboration, you have this joint ownership and it really harmonizes the disciplines. But I think it can't just happen. You sometimes have to really lay it out. When I first started in my very first, what was initially a multidisciplinary team that then changed over time into an interdisciplinary team, we had a lot of sort of push and pull around things like, should we have scissors out in the classroom? How do we do different aspects? How do we fit in some of the therapeutic methods within the classroom day? When I moved into home visitation, we were truly moving towards that interdisciplinary model where you had one person that was moving in to help to raise all of the various disciplines, but still collaborating together and having those inputs. So it's real important to think about how is your collaboration now? Are we all staying in our lanes? And is that what's working for us now? But how do then we move to these coherent and coordinated disciplines that are working together with children and families? And that's something that will take, a little bit of time to get there, but thinking about how to set that up. And the first step in doing that is to share your role. What do you see as your role? What is your perspective? And hearing what others have their perspective of your role is. The next piece is use those tools of your trade. So if you're working together, show what you do. Show what it means to embed oral motor skills into our circle time, and vice versa. Show for our therapists to embed some of those cognitive or speech skills into their therapy time as well. And then the last piece around that interdisciplinary collaboration is to really think about how do you include the child's caregivers. And really, I guess, as I'm reading it now and thinking about it, you want to be sure that they are included throughout as you're setting roles, because they have a really clear role in the home visitation process as well. And so we want to be sure that we are able to focus on what it is that the family needs as we're setting up those collaborative interdisciplinary teams. So really, when we start to think about replenishing, I find that having a team around me makes the work that I do so much more fulfilling and enjoyable than if I'm trying to do things in isolation. Having a sounding board, someone that can think with me, someone who can help me to see things from a different perspective. And so going back and thinking about that distinction between that focusing in on your area or seeing the whole picture, you want to have a balance of both as well. All right. So we've talked about renewing. Why are we in this place of renewal? We've talked about replenishing and rebuilding your collaborative relationships. And we're going to spend the last part of our time thinking about our why. And this all really comes from the wisdom of Simon Sinek. He really challenges you to know your why, so that you can think about your deeper purpose. Why is it that you are who you are? Why is it that you do what you do? And really thinking about how it manifests itself, not just in your work life, but also in your home life. And what he will say is that your why should transcend both. The work that you do should have the same why as your personal life. And thinking about, why is it that you are who you are? What are you trying to do and to accomplish? And so knowing your why can help with that collaboration. It can help with you really feeling that fulfillment at work. And he posits that everyone has a why. It's your deeper purpose. And even though you have a why, maybe you don't know how to express it. Maybe you're figuring out how to express it. And for me, it's sort of this evolving process of what is it that I'm doing, but with that common theme. Why am I doing that? And so that's what we're going to get into now. Sometimes when you ask a person, why are you doing that? Why did you take that job? Why are you engaged in that organization? You'll hear things like, well, I need to provide for my family, or I want to be successful. I want to leave a legacy. I want to have a positive impact. And while those are all good answers, some of them are more about the what's than the why. And so knowing your why can put you in the position to be inspired to go to work and come home fulfilled. And so that piece around fulfillment is huge. Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Most days, yes. Am I always fulfilled? Always. That's that distinction. So sometimes you can enjoy or be happy, and it's temporary, but fulfillment should be long lasting. All kinds of things can make us happy. Things like getting my paycheck or meeting a deadline, making sure that I get a report out the door, making sure that my team has everything that they need. That can make me happy. But if I only focused on tasks and not some of those bigger things, that fulfillment will wane. And so the distinction between being happy and fulfillment really is that happy is temporary, but fulfillment lasts. So those of you that have children in your lives, whether they're your own or maybe you have someone that you're close to, it's kind of that difference between like and love. Loving your children is that fulfillment. Liking them can be more of a challenge. And so that may be more fleeting. Some days are better than others. And while I loved my birth to 8-year-olds, because that was where my expertise lay, I now have a preteen and a teenager that is really challenging my notions of what it means to be a parent. And so the happiness is different within the life cycle of the family that I'm in, but I'm still fulfilled as a member of my family. And so being fulfilled is being part of something that's bigger than ourselves, and really thinking about how you are doing the work as well. And so the difference between fulfillment and happiness is why you can be really good at something, but not fulfilled. I could be really good at doing a task over and over and over again, but I don't think for my personality, it is something that fulfills me. And I know that because of the why that I have for the work that I do. So bonus points, if anyone knows who is on the screen here. Simon says that renewing passion for your work can be enhanced by finding your why, and that your vision is only actionable if you say it out loud. So that sounds familiar, right? Brene Brown talked about naming what was happening. So saying it out loud to normalize the feelings that you have. And then Simon Sinek goes on to say that your vision is only actionable if you say it out loud. If you keep it to yourself, it will remain a figment of your imagination. I put Figment up here. Some of you'd have to be probably a pretty diehard Disney fan to know Figment, but there is a character at Epcot that is the figment of your imagination. And so we don't want your vision to be a figment. We want it to be out there. We want you to be living the vision that you have for yourself, for your community, for the families with whom you work, for your own family. And so to create that actionable piece that you can say out loud, Simon talks about the golden circle. And you like how I just say Simon like I know him, but I feel like I do just in reading so much of his work. But he talks about this idea of the what, the how, and the why. And when you look at these concentric circles, the bigger the circle, the more people are able to verbalize that piece. And so what you notice within the golden circle is that the smallest one is the why. The what is the result. We all know what we do. And so, for example, you could say, I'm a home visitor. I meet with families. I help them to get resources, meet their goals to help to support their child. I could say that I help to lead a Head Start program and systems building. That's the what, it's the result. And so most people, I will say all people, can say what they do. When you move into that next of the concentric circles, it's a little bit smaller. It's the how you do it. How do you go about doing that? So in my world, we do a lot of convenings and collaborations and moving forward. It's that how, the process. Some know the how. These are the things that distinguish us from the crowd. So it's what makes me special and sets me apart. How does the work that I do when I carry it out, how is that different than what another organization does or another person in a similar role does? It's what sets us apart. And then that smallest circle is the why, and that's the purpose. This is that piece around finding that purpose. And if you'll notice, that's the smallest circle. So that means few can explain why we do what we do. It's not always about making money. That's a result. Instead, it's really your purpose. What is your cause, your belief? It's really what is that focus of your work? And that's what you want to get down to start to get to that phase of fulfillment, of feeling fulfilled with what it is that you do and how you do it, is getting into that piece around the why. But the other thing the reason that I think I'm drawn to Simon Sinek's work is he also talks about the brain, and how that golden circle of the what, the how, and the why connects with the brain. And so when we look at this very rudimentary diagram of the brain that he provides, that neocortex, so that larger part is responsible for the what. It's the newest part of our brain. It's our analytical thought and our language. So that's the what that we do. It's really where we describe what it is that we do. When we start to get into the limbic brain, that is where the how and the why exist. That's really responsible for our feelings, our human behavior, and our decision making. It's the part of the brain, the neocortex holds the language, the limbic brain holds those feelings. So that's why sometimes it's difficult for us to put our feelings into words. Like, I appreciate you more than words can say. Those phrases that we have that we utilize to sort of sum things up without getting deep into what it is that we're trying to say. And so what we're trying to do when we're getting to the why is to move from that neocortex of really thinking about analyzing what we do and getting into that emotional piece. What is driving the purpose that I have? What is helping me to move in the way that I would like to move within this work specifically? So great, Giovanna. We have to move all the way in. We have to get out of our neocortex. We need to start moving in. How am I going to get there? Well, I'm just going to give you a few quick things that are going to help you to get there as you're moving through. I would encourage you, if you're really interested in digging into your why, is to pick up Simon's book, which is Start with Why. It gives you that great information step by step to move through. But these are going to be just some pieces, because most of us are already unconsciously living our why. But when you state it, when you put it out there, you normalize it, your vision is there for you to act on, and it becomes a much more powerful tool, and helps you decide where to focus your efforts. I don't, some of you may get asked to do different things. And so it's what helps you to think about, how do I answer that? How do I answer that question? Does it fit within my why? And so when you're starting on that journey to why, you're going to gather and share stories and pan for gold. So what are some of the origin story around my why? What has gotten me to the point of the work that I'm doing? And then you're going to start to identify themes like, am I always trying to put people together to collaborate? How am I really working to be that connector in the work? Gosh, when I was young, I used to always bring groups together to do things, or I tried to build consensus. Looking at what are those themes, and there'll be pieces that start to come up within your work. And then the last piece is to start to draft a why statement. And I really want to point out, this is truly a sentence that is actionable, that you can work towards as well. And so the why statement truly is to blank so that blank. And the first blank is the contribution you make to the life of others. So really thinking about, what am I doing that is a contribution? And then the so that is the impact. What is the impact of the contribution? This why statement has to be simple. It has to be something that's actionable and focused on what you're going to do for others. And so just know that a why statement doesn't have to be a paragraph or a paper. It truly can be one sentence. Airbnb has a really simple why statement for their business: to connect millions of people in real life all over the world through a community marketplace so that you can belong anywhere. So their contribution is that connection in a community marketplace so that you can belong anywhere. Myself, I'm working through, what is it going to look like? And what I want to say is that I want to maximize collaboration and systems to enhance quality of life. And so the contribution is that maximizing collaboration and systems, and the impact is to enhance quality of life. I feel like that's sort of where I am, but it's still always a work in progress as I'm thinking it through. So ways that you can think about it in a different way is kind of this question of, what's your active ingredient? Why do you rise up? Whether it's figuratively or literally, why do I get up in the morning? Those are two questions that you can ask, and think about your active ingredient, that you're delivering the promise or benefit of a product is really why we have active ingredients on our products. It helps us to think about, what is that benefit that's giving. So I started to think about, well, what might be the makeup of a home visitor, to try to figure out the active ingredients. One is passion. Having that passion for what you do, and that starts to get at your why. Perseverance, that tenacity, being able to knock on that door even when they didn't answer the last 2 times, but trying once again, trying to find another phone number when the other one has been disconnected, or maybe you connect with them on Facebook because that's the only way that you can have that connection to them over time in the midst of phone numbers changing or addresses changing. A home visitor is willing to take risks, to shake up that status quo, to achieve goals for children and their families. Looking past, well, I've never done it that way before. They're also pragmatic. So you're willing to compromise. So small wins to get you towards that bigger goal. And I think when you're working with families, that's a really big piece of, how do you get those small wins as you're helping to move them towards the goals that they've set for themselves. You also need to have that flexibility. Dealing with unexpected turns, moving from an inside visit to a porch visit, looking at those pieces. Having respect for children and families, knowing that they come from that place of positive intent, really looking at respecting how they move through their world. Having authenticity, knowing who you are, what you stand for, and then having that love of learning. You always need to have that sense of humor and love of learning as you're moving through and then advocating not only for yourself, but also for the families with whom you work. And as you'll see, the active ingredients of a home visitor, of course, adds up to more than 100%, because most of the time we're giving much more than our all. And so naming it what it is that resonates with me, can help me to start to frame what my why is in the work. And so you have to think about active ingredients and your rising agents. So I always like to ask the question, when you're baking, so let's say you are asked to bring the dinner rolls. Some of us are going to go run to the store and get King's Hawaiian. I will raise my hand for that. Some of us are going to pop open a can. Some of us are going to pull out the Bisquick, and some of us are going to make it from scratch. And in order to make it from scratch, we have to have that rising agent, which in the case of bread is yeast. But we didn't always know that important ingredient was a part of what happened with the rising, and it took time. So just know that your most important active ingredient may not be at the surface yet, that you might have to do a little bit of time to figure out that rising agent, what helps you to rise to the occasion. And you might be thinking at this point, okay, Giovanna, you went from Brene Brown talking about vulnerability and around terrible first times, and Simon Sinek finding your why and looking at your rising agent. What does this have to do, this bread stuff have to do with my purpose and renewing where I am in my work? Well, I'm going to share that with you, because one of the things that I have come across is that the baker's words of wisdom. And I think this applies not only to what we do within the world of education and home visitation, but across a variety of sectors. And so the first words of wisdom that he has is get over the fear of failed bread. So it's going to happen. Sometimes you're going to bake something with yeast, your rising agent, and it's not going to work out. It's going to be rock solid. It's going to be folded in the middle. But what we can take from that then is that you could then use it for croutons instead. So as you're doing your work and you're going to try something new, get over the fear of it not working. Take it for where it is and move from where you are. So maybe you make croutons instead of a loaf of bread. So we have to create a salad rather than a sandwich. The second thing that he says that I think is applicable is to keep it simple. Find something you don't mind making and eating a lot, and then adding more to it. So figure out what you're really great at, and then add additional pieces to it. You can have that same base frame, but then just move it. Help to change it up, to reinvigorate, because you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, because you can get bored. So how do you change it up while still working with the basics that you've established? And then finally, he talks about thinking outside the loaf pan. Sometimes we get so caught up in, well, bread goes in the bread pan or a bread maker, that we don't think about what it might be like to do non-bread or pita bread or English muffins or focaccia. And so you can sometimes think differently to try out something. So if I've never worked with yeast, maybe I start with a pizza dough because it doesn't have to rise as high. And so I can think about that within my work, that if I want to try something new, maybe I start with a different version of it until I work up to that piece as well. So as you engage with families, I think the fall is a good time for us to think about what that renewing, rebuilding, and replenishing. And so I'm going to wind down our time together by just digging in and drilling down a little bit on the words renew, rebuild, and discover. So renew. I don't know how many of you like to go back to the origin. So just like Simon Sinek says, you need to find your origin story. I think when we're told that we need to renew and rebuild and rediscover, it's helpful to go back to the origin. So when we look up the word renew, the definition is a restoration of what had become faded or disintegrated. I'm going to say that again. A restoration of what had become faded or disintegrated. And so it's not that it's disappeared completely. It just has faded a little bit. It needs a facelift. It needs a little more attention. Maybe it needs a little more shine put on it. And so when you're thinking about your work and your role, and when you look at renewing, you're not starting over. You're restoring what's maybe faded and needs just a little bit extra attention. And when we look at the word rebuild, rebuild is to making like new without completely replacing. So making like new without completely replacing. So this is very similar to renew in that you're not starting from scratch. We're starting with we have something that we're building on, and that we're able to think about, how do I take new knowledge that I'm gaining? You all are in 2 days, 2 half days of sessions. How am I going to take the new knowledge that I'm gaining and use it to build upon the knowledge that I currently have without throwing everything out? And that may help to spark and put new attention into the work that I'm doing. And then rediscover. It's to discover something lost or forgotten again. So maybe there are some things that you heard yesterday or that you're hearing today that make you think a little bit differently. Think about, oh, gosh, I have lost my passion. Or man, and maybe if I just sat down and thought about my why and not just the what and the how, it'll help me to move forward in my work as I'm re-engaging during the fall. And so really thinking about how to embrace that discovery and have a face like the child that's on the screen because you're so excited about something that you've discovered. And so if you think back early into the conversation, I shared my way that I play is with word games and puzzles. And so one of the things I tried to do with these words, rebuild, renew, and rediscover, was find one word that you could use all the letters from to kind of wrap us together. But unfortunately, that's really difficult. But I did find a word that takes the I from rebuild, the N from renew, the D from discover, the U from rebuild, the C from rediscover, the E from renew, and put an S at the end to come up with the word induce. And so when we look at the word induce, it's gentle persuasion. And that is something that you do probably every day in your work. You might induce a family to try something new in their daily routine, induce a child to explore a new texture, induce a peer to collaborate in the work that you do, or induce a mentee to enter the field. It's really important that we are thinking about who is coming behind us and alongside us. But if we take inducing a little bit further, an inducement might lure you to do something. So what is something that might lure you to do something? Maybe one of the trainings that you're taking today is an inducement to lure you to try something different in your practice. And then induce alone can mean to produce. So like we use the term induce labor. And so that idea around production. And so I say these pieces because I want you to be thinking about how you rebuild, renew, and rediscover why it is that you do what you do. And of course, I want to then offer one more word before I give you my closing challenge, and that is appreciation. I so appreciate you and the work that you do with children and families. Your work is so important in that most of the time you are working with those families, you're the very first professional that is working with them, that are helping them to not only meet the needs of their children, but also themselves. And so I appreciate you and that you are still at it and engaging in this very, very important work in the young years. So thank you for that. So in closing, I hope that thinking about why we're here and how we've gotten to this point helps you to think about your renewing your sense of purpose, and that you're really thinking about replenishing and rebuilding your collaborative relationships and rediscovering why it is that you do knock on that door. So my challenge to you is to take time to name your why, to think about the two blank, so that what is my impact that I'm going to have, and how am I going to name that so that I take the power and am able to put that vision into practice. So again, thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you to the team that is putting the conference together for giving me time to just share some of the things that I've gleaned as I'm working through why it is that I keep doing my work. So thank you. And with that, I will say that it is your break time. You will get to leave this room and you will go on to the platform to then click into the next room that you will be working in. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. We will see everybody else in your breakout sessions. Thank you so much.